Glez.
Hi, Taj. Thanks for the introduction.
I know I messed it up a little bit. You have so many credentials. I was like, I was trying to get through all of it, but
Makes me sound really old.
no, I don't think. I think when people hear that introduction, they're gonna be like, "Wow, that's pretty impressive." And I really wanted to start out with like how you came out of retirement. I think that would be interesting for people to hear. Like, what was that whole process like of being like, okay, I'm retired, I'm going to school, I'm doing all these things, and then you decided to go back in 2008 to compete in the Beijing Olympics. Can you tell us a little bit of the backstory on that?
Yeah, and I have to step back to the first retirement, I think, if I tell you that story. So
Okay.
the first time around, I did not choose to retire. This was right before the Athens Olympics. And when I came back for the new season, I had just been accepted in business school. And my coaches said, basically, it's either you prepare for the Olympics and you train with us full time, or you're going to school, but we don't want you to do both. And so at the time, I was like, there's no way I'm going to give us this spot in a really good school. None of my parents have been to college. I wanted to have a good degree. This would open up so many doors for me, and I was always pretty focused on education. So I ended up stepping away. It wasn't really a choice. And I dived in full into the school. I found a job at the same time because I couldn't afford to pay for the school. So I had a company sponsor me through the whole 3 years of the 4 years of the school. So it was a hotel company that was supporting athletes. So I ended up working for them, going to school at night. And then when I graduated from school, they had an opening for a position in Australia, and I requested to go overseas. And the following, that was a really interesting time because they said, we have a position opening, but it's next week. Do you want to go to Australia? And I was like, sure, I'll move. So I ended up graduating, moving straight to Australia. I didn't even go to graduation, and started my job there a week later. And then the colleague I was working with actually moved to a different place, and they offered me the job, and that became more of a permanent situation. And so as I was down under, a way to find, your new community and expand your social network is to go through sport. So I remember I called the federation, I asked for a coaching position, and they didn't have, and I was happy to volunteer. It wasn't really for the work, it was more to meet people. And they didn't have a club available in Sydney. But they offered for me, they said, well, why don't you come to the national championship and swim? And I thought, oh my God, I haven't swum in 3 years. Like, this is crazy, but why not? It's a good way to like have fun and do it. So I ended up attending that competition. I swim an old routine and I won the competition. And the next Monday, as I went back to work, I got a phone call and they said, hey, would you consider swimming for the national team? And I was like, no way, I've been retired for 3 years. I have a full-time job. This is never going to work. And they said, okay. But my colleagues, we worked in a big open space. My colleague heard about it. And I got a phone call from the company CEO asking me to go to his office. I got to his office and he said, so about this national team appointment, are you going to take it? And I was like, what? How does this travel so fast? And then they offered me basically a sponsorship offer that I couldn't really refuse, where they said, we'll help you in any way we can, keep your job, you can come in later, you can leave early, you can travel for your competition. We just ask you that you attend, some of the internal conferences and you do some promotion within the company and tell your story, and we want to use you, for our brand. So that was like the best offer I could ever get. And I went back training, swimming, competing, but this time around, in my own terms and with a great support and sponsors behind me, which was amazing. And so I returned to the Olympics and then I retired. And I think for me, it was fantastic because I had the option to come back, do it for different reasons. And, if you're given a second chance, you'll enjoy every step of it, especially when you're competing for another country. And then when I stepped back again, it was like, yeah, I'm done. I've done everything I could. I came back. This feels really positive compared to the first time. So it was amazing. Kind of a really lucky opportunity.
Yeah, that's a really cool story. I never heard that story from you before, and it's it's kind of like almost every athlete's dream, where you've been retired for like 3 years, and then all of a sudden they call you back. Like I still have dreams that even though I just turned 30, like my college is gonna call me back and be like, Taj, we need you to suit up and play one more game.
And let me be clear, coming back it was very difficult physically. The sport had completely changed. It was so much faster, so much more athletic. I was getting older. Recovery was tough. Like I don't think I quite made it back to the level I was at. Competing for Australia was a lower level than I had been when I was competing for France. So I knew that the result would not be exactly the same, but that's also not what I was looking for. And we were training with a coach from Russia, and Russia was the leading country in the world. So for me, it was learning from these coaches, things that perhaps I hadn't seen before. And it was using this opportunity in different ways. I mean, being in a team with people from another country, learning their way of doing things, interacting differently with people and at a different time in your life, and taking that challenge of trying to come back with such a long break. I mean, there was just other things that were really important, and that made the whole thing super valuable from a personal growth perspective.
Right. Yeah, and obviously, you understand the challenges that athletes face after transition, which is why you founded Athlete Soul in the first place. But I'm curious, like after you left Beijing, after your last time competing, did you have any challenges, or was it kind of more of a graceful transition because you knew going into it, hey, I got this second chance? And did you have a softer landing, or were there still some challenges with your transition afterwards?
I think the second time around was so much easier, because I had a job, because I was married. I had like a proper situation to fall back onto. So I think that part was much easier. And also I had decided, this was it. There was no way I was gonna keep going. Where the first time around, emotionally was challenging, even though I'm like always pushing forward and not really looking back. Once I've made a decision, and I'm taking advantage of what I've decided, and I'm trying not to look back. But I remember doing some of the classic things that athletes do when they're retired, the fitness yo-yo, exercising like crazy and then stopping. But I was also struggling financially, and I had to find ways to pay for my school, which eventually was done by finding this company that was giving me a job. But then I had to work on the weekend and coach at night in addition to that to be able to pay my rent. So I struggled on the financial side. I mean, and definitely the identity side. I feel like every athlete will go through that at some point. The second time around, I think identity-wise, that I felt better because I had 4 years prior where I had been working. I knew I could do other things outside of sport, and that really helped. I had been to business school, had been working. I also lived in Thailand for a year with the hotel company I was working for. So I knew that I could fall back on my feet regardless of where I was.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's you already had lived a little bit, and like you said, had something to
Yep.
go back to, where it wasn't just like, I mean, a family, a career, all of this was in place, which is awesome. And then I know that there's a lot of steps. I talked about them in your bio. There's a lot of steps in between Beijing and you founding Athlete Soul. So
Mhm.
is there anything along the way that like was kind of leading you to this point? Did you ever have ideas of starting something like Athlete Soul, or was it something like how did the idea come about for you to found that company or that organization?
Um, so I think after my first retirement, there was always frustration and around the fact that, and this is maybe a little bit specific to synchronized swimming because the hours of training are enormous every day, and it's really complicated to combine education and athletics. And also the system in France is not necessarily set up for that, but actually it was everywhere around the world. And I think in certain sport, it's just really difficult to combine a certain type of academics. Like if you want to be a lawyer, or if you want to be going to medical school or business school, it's, you know, it's nearly impossible to combine that with sport. And I was always frustrated with that. I always felt that there could be some adjustment on both sides. Why can't, you know, sports league and coaches understand the importance of developing outside of sport? Because I felt I was much stronger when I came back from mentally, from having lived different things, from having done different things. The strengths that you get from a mindset perspective, it was great. I mean, there were skills that were a little bit more difficult, but they were like on speed, on flexibility. There was a lot of things that I did better. And so I was always hoping that there would be a little bit of give from the sport industry, but also a little bit of give from the corporate side on, like, you can hire people and not have them there 100% of the time, but still contribute, you know, 100% to your company. How can we get the corporation to understand that? And so I still think there is a place for athletes to combine both. And I think that the flexibility and the virtual work is bringing that a little bit more to the forefront. So that was always in the back of my mind. And then I, as a coach and as a team leader, I saw a lot of athletes struggle with identity crisis post-sport, or even having a degree and not knowing what they wanted to do and not knowing how to transition and what to do. And so I think watching it from the sideline plus my own experiences is sort of what brought athletes all more forward, and the feeling of like there is a lack of understanding on how we can use those skills, those people with incredible talent, and switch them over in a different place. This could be done much more efficiently, quicker, so that these incredible people can continue to contribute to society positively and really continue their impact. You know, why are we losing this? Why are we losing this and not using it? We should harvest those skills. So that, I think that's where I came from. It's a bit of a combination of things.
As it always is, yeah. And it's been amazing to watch the growth of Athlete Soul as well. And I'm grateful just, you know, to be a part of it, and that I connected with you early, because a little bit of backstory for people who don't know, I was listening to a podcast and I heard Myriam tell her story and talk about Athlete Soul. And I'm like, this is when I was a year or two into doing transition coaching for athletes. And I'm like, whoa, this is amazing. I have to get in touch with this woman. So I did what I always do. I just reached out. I just took a shot. You know, and for anyone who doesn't know, Myriam is like a people person and super like willing to help and have conversations with people. So we connected, you know, and we're going back and forth and kind of sharing each other's curriculum and how we're going about the athlete's transition. And we're like, wow, this is very similar. Like, and I think instantly there was a connection, like, okay, you get it. You know, you understand there's no checking boxes. They're just cookie cutter solutions. It was all very well thought out. And then I was fortunate enough that you just so happened to be building a team of transition coaches at the time, and, you know, gave me the opportunity to coach for your organization. And it's a beautiful thing. I was saying at the beginning how grateful I am to be a part of it. And I know it's still early and there's some really exciting things coming from in the future for athletes. So, but for people tuning in, I always say a lot of people don't understand building a nonprofit is very entrepreneurial. There's not a whole lot of difference. You have to build teams and systems and grow and scale. And, you know, can you just dive a little bit into the process of what it's like starting from nothing, starting from scratch, and building a nonprofit and building Athlete Soul up to where it is today? Like, what is that process like?
Yeah, so I think the first step for us were really very much legal and compliance. So you got to build your shell basically. So, and that's very similar to any corporation. Figure out from a legal perspective. So for a nonprofit, you have to build your bylaws. You have to submit your bylaws to whichever state you register in, and then for a nonprofit specifically, you have to apply for tax exemption, which is your most important step, because that's what will help you do all your fundraising. So that typically can take up to a year to get your tax exemption from the IRS. It's a lot of legal paperwork. We actually got it pretty quickly. And then once you've done everything at a federal level, you do it at your state level as well. So there's a bunch of registrations and things. So that's sort of the legal compliance side. And with that goes, your accounting, building your accounting, getting your business account from a banking perspective. We decided very early on that we would do everything virtually. Even before COVID, we knew that would be our model, because we thought, one, it's the future. Two, we're a nonprofit. We want to save money from any type of rent, and three, athletes are always on the road. So let's find them where they are instead of in a specific location. The other side is more of the marketing side, building your website, how you're going to communicate with people, developing your different communication channels. Those are really steps to build your shell of your organization. And then the next step, we're really looking at the services, how we're going to put together the different services that we offer, what's the content. So the first year was about building the shell. The second year has been really about developing content and programs. And then the next step for a nonprofit is the focus on fundraising. And obviously these steps can be done in different order depending on what your focus is on. What else can I share? Yeah, this would be the three things you would do. And then prior to all of this, we really started with just like any business, creating a business plan, having some direction on who do we want to serve, how do we want to serve these people, what are our competitors, what does the market look like, where are we going to sit within the market, what is the way to differentiate ourselves and be unique compared to everybody else, how do we bring in revenue in, how do we serve the different audiences, etc. So I think it's pretty similar to any business, but it's definitely daunting when you get started because there is so much to do.
Yeah, I think one of the things I've come to admire about it over time is just your strategic approach, because you just named a lot of moving parts and a lot of different things, but it's not like you're just waking up every day like, what am I doing today? Like you have a roadmap mapped out and you're playing the long game. And so like recently, that's something that I've been like, I admire people like you, and I'm able to kind of watch you and study how you're building this system. Even with me coming on as vice president of Self-Published in 30 Days and being able to work directly under Darren Palmer, I get to watch him grow and lead and build and scale teams as well. So it's like I have even more respect for you now than even when we first connected, because I look at you as like, how did Myriam actually build and scale this and build this out? So I'm getting to study you, and I think that's really cool. And I know you have a lot of exciting things going on right now, but what is the future of Athlete Soul? We can talk kind of like short term or more like way out into the future. What's on the horizon?
Yep. And I think this is super timely because this is exactly what we're working on. And when you talk about entrepreneurship, I think that's one element that's very difficult, and I still kind of struggle with it, is the structure you have at point A is not the structure you'll have at point Z where you want to be at. And so you've got to evolve your structure throughout the life of your organization as you grow and manage cash flow as you grow with the structure. So there are points in your life. And right now we actually, I've been expanding our structure to bring in more people, but it's trying to find that time frame where it makes sense to do it, when you're ready for it. How long will that last for? What's the next checkpoint where you're going to perhaps have a different growth? And also considering, like, for example, we haven't done a lot of partnership with bigger brands or bigger organizations because we want to be fully ready. We want to have a really good product. We want to be able to serve those partnerships really well and activate them really well. And so you have to have the structure and the people in place in order to do that. So it's finding that balance, right, between moving still forward and developing, but still have the structure in place at those times. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that it's a really
So you
great
asked
point.
me what the future is. Right now, we are expanding, bringing in more people so that we can delegate some of the more operational things that we do related to programming, events, so that me and some other members and board members can really focus on doing more fundraising and having more financial capabilities so that we can support more athletes individually. So our goal is to really support athletes one-on-one with the transition coaching, with internship, with career coaching. And in order to do that, we want to be able to offer more scholarships. And so we raise more money for that.
Right.
So more fundraising, more athletes, and so on.
Yeah. I think I love how you kind of went through the process of what do they always say? It's like entrepreneurship or building a business is like trying to build a plane while you're already in the air. Is that the analogy? Or something like that? The plane's already in the air, but you're having to build it and adjust it on the fly. And I think
It's
that
like those games you did as a kid, where you're moving the board behind you, in front of you, and then stepping on it, and again and again. So there's a little bit of like, oh, I got to deal with all the operational stuff, but then I need to think about things in 5 years. I think when you're an entrepreneur, you're constantly doing that. You're pulled in two different directions. And that's what's exciting, I think, because you're still attached to reality and the day-to-day stuff. And I mean, this morning I did the final registration renewal with the attorney general for California and taxes. And then I'm thinking about a strategic meeting that we have tomorrow with some of our board members about, the next steps. And so I think that's what you do as an entrepreneur is, you're running the race, but you're thinking about the Olympics, and you're constantly doing that. And it's really fascinating because I think it really challenges you. And for athletes typically who have a lot of energy and very ambitious, I think it's a really relevant field of working because you are challenged in every way possible.
Right. Emotionally,
Mm-hmm.
spiritually, it is definitely a challenge, like you said. And that's why we're even here. So I appreciate you sharing that because that's the whole point of these events is just to show, not only give examples of people like yourself, but just to show that athletes make phenomenal entrepreneurs for that very reason, because we love that excitement. We love that, like, okay, every day is game day. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm ready to respond and I'm ready to think on my feet and make some magic happen. Like Dana said
And
earlier,
you understand the management of multiple goals. You understand the management of achieving 2 days training goal, and how you're going to transfer that on game day and how you're going to react on game day. So I think that's really important because it's exactly what you do as an entrepreneur.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I want to be respectful of your time, Myriam, but I have one final question for you. What is, because I know everything that you've done and everything that you're going to do in your life is going to be, of course, Athlete Soul is a major, like, monumental thing, but there's going to be so much more. So what is the legacy of Myriam Glez? Like, how do you want people to remember you throughout the rest of time, the rest of history? How do you want to go down in the history books?
This is really interesting because I hear this this question a lot, and I don't really need to be remembered as anything. And even for Athlete Soul, like for me, I think of it as a system with many people that supports it. And I think that for me, that's what the beauty of it is that nothing can function just with you. So if I can be part of this movement forward of like improving how we help athletes transition out of sport, I'll be pretty happy. But it doesn't need to be about me. And separately, I feel the same way, just in my life in general. And I know we like to think as ourselves as pretty special, but I like to think as myself as a pretty pretty general person that takes care of her family and help her kids, and it's just part of helping everybody. But I don't need to be remembered for anything.
I definitely hear you on that. Yeah, I feel the same way. I don't take myself very seriously at all, and I know what you mean. But I'm gonna acknowledge you anyway, because the work you're doing is very important, and you an Athlete Soul is making history and changing the game for athlete transition. So I know it's not about you, but you deserve to be acknowledged anyway. Matter of fact, I think this is the only copy of my book that I have here, but I acknowledged a lot of people in my book, but you were one of them. And I just want to read this for everybody on the line. I'm going to make it awkward for you right now and just read your acknowledgement out loud. So I wrote, "Thank you to Athlete Soul founder Myriam Glez for believing in my coaching ability enough to bring me on board as a transition coach for her amazing organization. Being an Athlete Soul coach has enabled me to grow in my coaching ability 10 times faster than I would have been able to by relying solely on my own processes. I encourage everyone to go check out what Athlete Soul is doing to help athletes transition at athletesoul.space. I know I already gave the website address, but Myriam, please tell everyone how they can learn more about Athlete Soul, how they can get in touch with you, and where you can be found, all of that.
Yeah, so you can definitely go to the website, which actually is now athletesoul.org. Oh. We're making progress, woohoo. Or you can reach me at Myriam@athletesoul.org. And then I want to bounce back on what you just read, because I think the important message here is really that we all much stronger together, and we can make a bigger impact if we join forces. And for me, this is what this is about. With Athlete Soul, with meeting you, with meeting other people in this space, the more we can share ideas, bounce off each other, support each other, the more impact we're going to make. And this is what I love about the organization, about what you do, our connection, and that's definitely how I want to keep moving forward. Is just use the strengths of everybody so that we can have a better impact.
That's right. Well, Myriam, thank you again. Thank you so much for your time on a Saturday, for taking time away from the family to come on and share with us. This was awesome having you here, and I'm looking forward to everything we're working on now behind the scenes, and then everything that's coming out in the future with us and Athlete Soul. And I just thank you for your time. I appreciate you.
Thanks, Taj. Thanks for everything you do, because you're pulling your weight, man. It's awesome. It's really cool. And I love to see what you've done with Athlete to Entrepreneur and all the different books. And hopefully we can do an Athlete Soul book very soon too.
Oh, it's coming, folks. Stay tuned. Stay tuned. We'll keep that in the wraps for now, but keep a lookout for that Athlete Soul book. It's coming your way.
All right. Thanks, Dad.
All right, Myriam. Thank you. Have a good one.